Now we'll begin with booklet B. So the first question, Andy has a wooden object with a hole in the center. He placed it between a torch and a screen in the dark room as shown below. So if we look at this diagram here, you have a torch, a wooden object with a hole in the middle, and a screen. So when the torch was turned on, a shadow of the object is formed on the screen, and over here you're asked to draw the shadow that is formed. Okay, so in this case here, because it is a round object with a hole in the middle, the shadow form will also be a round object with a hole in the middle. So it should look something like this. Okay, secondly, where your shadow is cast, it has to be shaded to indicate that that is the shadow. So if you do not shade, you only draw the shape, then you will have a half mark deducted. Okay, so it's important to shade your shadows. You do not have to color it like this in the diagram. Just draw the lines to shade it will be sufficient. Alright, let's move on to part B. So part B, what is the property of the wooden object that results in the shadow? So you're looking for the properties. Can we all highlight this? Property. So the wooden object, in order to cast a shadow, it has to have this set of properties before a shadow can be casted. Okay, and the property is actually that it does not allow light to pass through it. Okay, and remember I said if you cannot spell opaque, then you will have to say this phrase does not allow light to pass through, or can simply say block light, and the word opaque is also acceptable. So any one of these that are highlighted in yellow is acceptable as the answer. Alright, so you can take down the answers. Alright, next, explain how a shadow is formed. So a shadow is formed when an opaque object or a translucent object actually blocks light. Okay, so I'll go back to the answers and show you. It is formed when you can say either one, an opaque object blocks light, or you can say when a light is shone on an opaque or translucent object. Any one of this is fine. Okay? James wanted to find out the amount of light which can pass through three different materials, X, Y, and Z. So over here is the setup. So material X can be replaced with material Y and material Z. So after James observed the shadow form, he recorded the results as shown below. So over here you have three types of shadow, and if you look carefully, there is different intensity. So X actually has the darker shadow. Alright, X actually has the darker shadow. Y has a lighter shadow. And for Z, you notice that there is no shadow. So based on the shadows, we can actually conclude what kind of object it is, or what kind of material, the property of the material X, Y, and Z. So in order to form the darker shadow, X actually does not allow light to pass through, or in other words, it is actually opaque. I'm just going to type opaque here because it's going to get too long. And Y is actually a translucent object because it allows some light to pass through, and that's why the shadow casted is not as dark as your material your material X. And last of all, you realize that Z has no shadow form, which means that it is actually a transparent object because it allows all light to pass through, hence it doesn't block light and no shadow is formed. So let's look at the questions that are asked. So based on the results obtained, answer the following question. Arrange the materials X, Y, and Z starting from material that allows greatest amount of light first, followed by the least amount of light. So already draw the boxes for you, and they have also indicated where the greatest amount should be, where the least amount should be. So the greatest amount of light that can actually pass through is your Z. Because no shadow is formed, followed by your Y, And last of all, X. Alright, so this is how it should be. Next, James wanted to wrap a bottle of medicine with a material that does not allow light to pass through. Okay, and the reason is because light is going to make the medicine turn bad. So we're looking for object material that does not allow light to pass through. And looking at your sentences here, the one that does not allow light to pass through is actually X. Okay, so next thing you need to do is to state which material, and you have to give a reason for your choice. So you have to explain why you choose it. Okay, so the answers are here. It is material X, and the reason is because it does not allow light to pass through. Or you can say that it allows the least amount of light to pass through based on the diagram that we saw earlier. Alright, so we're going to continue with question 31. So Shooting conducted an experiment to find out the amount of light that would pass through 4 different materials, P, Q, R, and S. So same thing, you have the setup here. Your material will change out. So she used a light sensor to detect the amount of light that passed through each material, and the setup is shown over here. Alright? So next, when no material was placed between the object, so there's no material, only the torch and the light sensor, the amount of light detected was actually 500 units. So this shows that the torch itself, if no material, the light sensor will detect 500 units of light from the torch. And the following table shows a result with different materials were placed between the torch and the light sensor. So over here, S, you realize that at 0, it does not allow any light to pass through when material S is put in between. So because of that, we can conclude that S does not allow any light to pass through. And P, it actually allows 500 units of light, so therefore we can say that it allows most light to pass through, or rather in this case, it actually allows all the light to pass through, because the light or the torch can emit 500 units of light, and this all 500 is detected by the light sensor even when material P is placed in between. Okay, so next, using the same torch and light sensor while keeping their positions the same, state 2 variables that have to be kept constant. That means you want to keep the same in order for it to be a fair test. Okay, so in order for it to be a fair test, there are a few things that we need to keep constant. The first one will actually be the thickness of the material used, or the size of the material used, the location of the experiment, okay, and the rest is the distance between the material from the torch and the light sensor, torch and the material and the light sensor. Alright, so all these are accepted. Okay, these are also other accepted answers, same time of the day, the position, the height or the length of the size of the material, and that to make sure that there's no other lights from the surroundings, and that the material is kept upright instead of the other way around. So these are the acceptable answers. You just have to state 2. Okay, so let's move on to B. So based on her results, one of the material P, Q, R, and S will be most suitable to make part Y of the spectacles, and which material should we be using for reading? So this is not to block out the sunlight, this is to use for reading. Okay, so therefore, part Y is actually your lens. And if it's used for reading, means it actually have to be clear. So the most suitable material will actually be P. P is actually the most suitable material. Alright, and the reason is because P from this experiment actually allows the most light, or allows all the light to pass through. Okay, or you can say that it is transparent, and we know it's transparent because it allows the most light to pass through. So that is your reason.